5 helicopters. That is the number Iranian state media claims were struck during an operation over the Strait of Hormuz. According to Iranian sources, all 5 were AH-64 Apache attack helicopters conducting offensive missions against coastal installations when Iranian air defenses engaged them. No independent confirmation of the claim exists. The United States military has not acknowledged losses, but the claim itself, its timing, its specificity, and its circulation through Iranian and regional media is analytically significant regardless of whether every detail proves accurate. Subscribe to Pivot Analysis right now and turn on notifications. What is being documented here is the intersection of kinetic operations and information warfare in a conflict where strategic narratives matter as much as tactical outcomes. The claim requires examination not just for what it asserts, but for what its existence reveals about the current state of the confrontation. According to Iranian state media and military sources, a confrontation occurred over the Strait of Hormuz involving 5 U.S. AH-64 Apache helicopters. Iranian sources allege the helicopters were conducting offensive operations against Iranian coastal military installations when they were engaged by Iranian air defense systems. The claim, which emerged through Iranian state-run news agencies and military channels, asserts that all 5 helicopters were struck during the engagement. Iranian sources describe the incident as beginning with Apache strikes against coastal missile batteries and naval positions along Iran's southern shoreline. According to these accounts, the helicopters targeted multiple sites, including defense positions, storage facilities, and infrastructure supporting Iranian naval forces. Iranian media reported explosions, fires, and structural damage at several locations along the coast. The Iranian narrative then describes a defensive response. According to Iranian military sources, air defense systems were activated and successfully engaged the helicopters. Iranian claims state that all 5 aircraft were hit, though the accounts do not specify whether the helicopters were destroyed, forced to abort their mission, or returned to base with damage. No wreckage photographs have been circulated, no pilot capture has been announced, no video documentation of downed aircraft has been published. The United States military has not confirmed the incident. U.S. Central Command has not issued statements regarding Apache losses in the Strait of Hormuz operational area. The Pentagon has not acknowledged casualties or aircraft damage matching the Iranian description. As of this analysis, no independent verification from Western military sources, regional allies, or neutral observers has emerged. What remains documentable is this: the claim exists. It is being circulated through Iranian media infrastructure, it is being amplified through regional outlets, and it has been positioned by Iranian sources as evidence of successful defense against American offensive operations. The gap between the claim's existence and its verification is where the analytical work begins. Look at what the documented facts establish about Apache operations in the Strait of Hormuz region. U.S. military sources, including Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Dan Kane, confirmed on March 19 that AH-64 Apache helicopters are actively operating in the area. According to Pentagon briefings, Apaches have been deployed alongside a 10 Warthog aircraft to strike Iranian fast attack boats and intercept Iranian drones. These are confirmed operations. The helicopters are in the area. The mission set is documented. The AH-64E Apache is designed for precisely the type of operations Iranian sources describe. The helicopter carries AGM-114 Hellfire missiles capable of engaging both ground targets and small maritime vessels. Its 30mm M230 chain gun can strike multiple target types. Its advanced sensor suite allows target identification and engagement in coastal environments where terrain, infrastructure, and maritime activity create complex targeting conditions. An Apache operating near Iranian coastal installations would be conducting exactly the type of mission Iranian sources allege, targeting coastal defense systems, missile batteries, and naval infrastructure. Look at the defensive systems Iran has positioned in the Strait of Hormuz region. Iranian air defense architecture includes radar-guided surface-to-air missile systems, short-range air defense platforms, and mobile systems designed to counter low-altitude threats. Iranian forces have deployed systems capable of tracking and engaging helicopters operating in coastal zones. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps maintains integrated air defense coverage along Iran's southern coastline, specifically to protect the installations Iranian sources claim were targeted. The tactical picture, stripped of the specific casualty claim, is entirely plausible. American Apaches are operating in the area. Iranian coastal installations are legitimate military targets in the current conflict. Iranian air defenses are active and positioned to counter aerial threats. Helicopters conducting strikes in defended airspace face engagement risk. What remains unverified is the outcome. Iranian sources describe 5 helicopters struck in a single engagement. This is not simply a casualty report. This is a narrative deployment. The Iranian claim serves multiple strategic functions, whether or not every detail is accurate. First, it positions Iranian air defenses as effective against advanced American platforms. The claim asserts that Iran can impose costs on American offensive operations, that Iranian defensive systems can track and engage sophisticated helicopters, and that American forces operating near Iranian airspace face meaningful risk. This is deterrence, signaling a message to Washington that escalation carries price tags that accumulate. Second, the claim addresses a domestic audience. Iran's population has absorbed weeks of American and Israeli airstrikes. Iranian military infrastructure has been targeted. Iranian coastal installations have been damaged. Iranian naval assets have been destroyed. Against this backdrop, a claim of successful defensive action, American helicopters struck, American offensive operations disrupted, serves as counter-narrative to weeks of tactical setbacks. It is morale management during a period when Iranian forces have been primarily on the receiving end of precision strikes. Third, the claim functions as regional posturing. Iran's strategic position in the Middle East rests partly on perceptions of capability. If regional states believe Iran cannot defend its own coastline, cannot impose costs on American operations, cannot maintain defensive effectiveness under sustained pressure, Iran's deterrent value erodes. A claim of successful helicopter engagement, even if unverified, circulates through regional media, reaches regional audiences, and reinforces the image Iran requires to maintain its strategic posture. The absence of evidence becomes analytically significant. If 5 American helicopters were downed, wreckage would exist. Crash sites would be documentable, pilots would be captured or recovered, the Pentagon would face congressional and public pressure to acknowledge and explain the losses. None of this has emerged. The silence from American military sources is not neutral. It suggests either the incident did not occur as described, or the outcome was significantly different from what Iranian sources claim. Look at what this claim, verified or not, means for the economic dimension of the Strait of Hormuz crisis. If Iranian air defenses can impose costs on American helicopter operations, the Pentagon's planning for reopening the strait becomes more complex and more expensive. Every additional defensive capability Iran demonstrates, every additional risk American forces face, lengthens the timeline for clearing the waterway and increases the resources required to establish secure passage for commercial shipping. Oil markets do not wait for verification. The claim circulates. Traders assess risk. Insurance premiums adjust. Shipping companies recalculate exposure. Brent crude, which crossed $100 per barrel when Iran closed the strait, remains elevated partly because the reopening timeline remains uncertain. If American forces face higher than expected defensive resistance, if helicopters conducting coastal strikes are being engaged and potentially damage the operation to clear Iranian threats from the waterway extends further into the future. If you heat your home with fuel oil, if your electricity generation depends on natural gas imports, if your job involves manufacturing that depends on petrochemical inputs, the Strait of Hormuz timeline is already in your monthly bills. The longer the strait remains contested, the longer global energy supplies route around the choke point, the longer prices remain elevated. A claim of successful Iranian air defense, even if partially propaganda, contributes to market uncertainty, which contributes to price volatility, which reaches every sector of the economy that runs on energy. The strategic calculation for Washington also shifts based on perceived Iranian defensive capability. If Iran can effectively engage American helicopters conducting coastal strikes, the next phase of operations, potential ground landings on Iranian islands to establish forward operating positions, becomes riskier and more resource-intensive. American planners must account for air defense coverage, anti-aircraft systems, and the possibility of helicopter losses during insertion and extraction operations. The claim itself, regardless of its accuracy, becomes data that feeds into American operational planning. The silence from U.S. Central Command is not accidental. The Pentagon has been issuing regular updates on operations in and around the Strait of Hormuz. General Kane's March 19 briefing confirmed Apache deployment. Subsequent statements have detailed strikes against Iranian naval assets, destruction of mine-laying vessels, and ongoing operations to degrade Iranian coastal defenses. What has not appeared in any Pentagon statement is acknowledgement of helicopter losses, Apache casualties, or aircraft damage matching the Iranian claim. American military transparency regarding aircraft losses has been consistent throughout the conflict. When F-15s were shot down by friendly fire, the Pentagon acknowledged it. When Reaper drones were destroyed, the losses were documented. When an F-35 made an emergency landing after taking potential fire, it was reported. The pattern suggests that if 5 Apaches were struck, damaged, or downed, the information would surface either through official acknowledgement or through service member communications, base-level reporting, or congressional inquiry. The absence of confirmation does not prove the incident never occurred. It does, however, shift the analytical weight. Unverified claims require stronger evidence as they scale in significance. A claim of 1 helicopter damaged is easier to leave in ambiguous space than a claim of 5 helicopters struck in a single engagement. The larger the alleged incident, the harder it becomes to suppress, contain, or deny if it actually occurred as described. Iranian media patterns also reveal something. When Iran has successfully struck American assets in past conflicts, documentation has followed quickly. Video of drone strikes against bases, imagery of damaged infrastructure, statements from Iranian military leadership with specific operational details. The current claim lacks this level of documentation: no crash site coordinates, no imagery of wreckage, no identification of specific helicopter serial numbers or unit designations. The claim exists in narrative form without the evidentiary scaffolding that usually accompanies successful strikes against high-value American assets. To be fair, there is a scenario in which elements of the Iranian claim could be partially accurate without matching the full narrative. American helicopters operating in contested airspace face defensive fire. Apaches conducting coastal strikes would encounter Iranian air defense systems attempting to track and engage them. It is operationally plausible that helicopters took fire, maneuvered defensively, possibly sustained minor damage, and returned to base without catastrophic loss. In this interpretation, Iranian air defenses engaged American helicopters. This part could be true. Systems fired, helicopters were targeted. But struck does not necessarily mean downed. Hit does not necessarily mean destroyed. The helicopters could have evaded, deployed countermeasures, and exited the engagement zone. Iran could be describing attempted intercepts as successful strikes, defensive actions as confirmed kills, and tactical engagements as strategic victories. The competing interpretation that the incident is largely fabricated rests on the absence of independent confirmation, the lack of physical evidence, and the Pentagon's silence. If no Apaches were hit, if no helicopters were damaged, if the engagement Iranian sources described did not occur, then the claim functions purely as information warfare. It would be narrative construction designed to serve the strategic functions outlined in Chapter 3: deterrence signaling, domestic morale management, regional posturing without requiring factual accuracy. What remains genuinely uncertain is the ground truth. The claim exists, the verification does not. American and Iranian forces are operating in proximity. Engagements are occurring. The specific outcome Iranian sources describe has not been independently confirmed. Analysts examining the claim are working with incomplete information, which is itself revealing about the current information environment in the Strait of Hormuz conflict zone. 3 specific indicators will clarify whether the Iranian claim reflects tactical reality or strategic narrative. Watch. Pentagon casualty reporting. If American service members were killed or injured in a helicopter engagement, congressional notification is mandatory. Casualty figures are tracked publicly. If the numbers shift to include helicopter crew losses in the coming days, it confirms at least partial accuracy of the Iranian claim. If casualty figures remain unchanged, it suggests the incident did not occur as described. Watch for operational pattern changes. If American Apache operations in the Strait of Hormuz region decrease in frequency or altitude, if helicopter missions shift to different operational profiles, if the Pentagon adjusts tactics to account for higher than expected air defense effectiveness, it signals that Iranian defensive capabilities are being reassessed. Tactical adjustments following an engagement are documentable even when the engagement itself is not fully disclosed. Watch Iranian media follow through. If the claim was accurate, Iranian sources will build on it. Additional details will emerge. Imagery may surface. Senior military officials will reference the incident in statements. If the claim was primarily narrative, it will circulate for a brief period and then fade as Iranian media shifts to new claims. The durability and development of the narrative over the next week reveals how much evidentiary foundation exists beneath it. The Strait of Hormuz remains contested. American operations to reopen the waterway continue. Iranian defenses remain active. Claims and counterclaims will proliferate as both sides manage information alongside kinetic operations. The analytical task is not to accept or reject claims reflexively, but to track what emerges, what is verified, and what patterns reveal about the actual state of the confrontation. Subscribe to Pivot Analysis and turn on notifications. This channel examines claims, verifies what is documentable, and identifies what remains uncertain. When information warfare and kinetic warfare operate simultaneously, understanding which is which matters. The next development in the Strait of Hormuz will be covered here before the narrative has settled. Here is the question requiring analytical judgment rather than reflexive acceptance. If Iran's claim about 5 helicopters is partially accurate but operationally exaggerated, what does the gap between the claim and the reality reveal about Iran's current assessment of its own strategic position? Respond with your analysis in the comments.